Everyone ignored the single dad in 12F, until his signal made the F-22 pilots salute a general. The plane had barely leveled out at cruising altitude when the man in seat 12F shifted uncomfortably, balancing his sleeping little girl against his chest. He looked tired, his hair slightly unkempt, his jacket too worn for the business class crowd surrounding him. People passed him by on the jet bridge earlier without a second glance. To most, he was just another single dad flying coach, trying to keep his child quiet for the long journey ahead. No one knew his story. No one cared to ask. The little girl stirred, her soft curls brushing against his chin. He kissed her forehead and whispered, "We'll be home soon, sweetheart." His voice carried a depth of weariness but also something steady, something strong. A few rows ahead, a businessman rolled his eyes when the girl dropped her toy and it clattered loudly onto the floor. A woman tugged her blanket closer, avoiding eye contact as though sitting near the man was somehow beneath her. For hours, he remained invisible. Only a flight attendant gave him a kind smile, slipping an extra juice box for the child. But as the plane approached American airspace, something unusual happened. Out the window, two gray shadows appeared, F-22 Raptors, sleek and menacing, flying in tight formation alongside the commercial jet. Passengers gasped, craning their necks to see. Phones tilted against windows, people whispering nervously about threats or emergencies. The atmosphere grew tense. The man in 12F, however, sat up straighter. His expression changed, not fear, but recognition. Slowly, carefully, so he wouldn't wake his daughter, he pressed two fingers against the window in a distinct motion. A signal. Not a wave, not a random gesture, but precise, deliberate, and unmistakable. And then, something remarkable happened. The lead F-22 tilted its wings slightly in acknowledgement. Then the second followed. And before anyone could process what was happening, both fighters dipped in unison, an unmistakable aerial salute. Gasps filled the cabin. The businessman who had rolled his eyes earlier stared in disbelief. The woman with the blanket dropped it to her lap. Every passenger knew they were witnessing something extraordinary. Whispers shot through the rows. What's going on? Why are they saluting him? Who is that man? The single dad in 12F just lowered his hand and looked back down at his daughter, adjusting her blanket as though nothing had happened. But the flight attendant, still wide-eyed, crouched beside him. "Sir," she whispered, "I have to ask, why did they salute you?" He hesitated. His voice was quiet, almost reluctant, but the weight of truth carried through every syllable. "Because once I was their commanding officer." The realization rippled through the rows. Passengers leaned closer, listening. He wasn't just some weary single dad. He was a retired Air Force general, a man who had led pilots through missions most civilians would never hear about. A man who had given everything, his career, his strength, even time with his family, for the country he loved. But the most unexpected part wasn't that revelation. It was the humility with which he carried it. He never introduced himself as a general. He never demanded recognition. He was simply a father now, trying to raise his daughter alone after losing his wife. The businessman cleared his throat, suddenly ashamed of his earlier disdain. The woman beside him gently touched the general's arm and whispered, "Thank you, for your service." Soon, the whole section began to murmur words of gratitude. A young boy tugged at his mother's sleeve, wide-eyed, and asked if he could shake the general's hand. The man in 12F smiled faintly and extended it, his weathered palm meeting the boy's small fingers. By the time the flight landed, the atmosphere in the cabin had transformed. Passengers who once ignored him now looked at him with respect, admiration, and even love. Some offered to help him with his bag. Others simply stood a little taller, inspired by the quiet dignity of the man they had overlooked. As he stepped off the plane, carrying his sleeping daughter, the two F-22s soared past the airport in a final, thunderous flyover. People on the ground shielded their eyes, pointing to the sky. But inside the terminal, the general walked silently, blending back into the crowd like any other man, except now, those who had shared that flight would never forget him. He had reminded them of something vital: heroes don't always wear capes, and greatness isn't measured by appearances. Sometimes it's the tired dad in the back row, rocking his child to sleep, who once carried the weight of a nation on his shoulders. And though the salute had been for him, the lesson was for everyone watching. Never judge a stranger by what you see. For behind weary eyes and quiet humility may lie a story of sacrifice, courage, and love. The single dad in 12F never asked for applause. He only asked for his daughter's comfort. But on that flight, without saying much at all, he gave an entire plane full of people something far greater: hope, pride, and a reminder of the unseen heroes who walk among us every day.